All right, friends, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about something that I know I experience a lot now that I work from a desk, more so than I'm on the gym floor. And I'm sure you deal with it too. And that's shoulder pain, neck pain, and that tight, crunchy feeling in your upper back after you've been at your desk all day. That thing that you're shaped like a cashew for 8 hours sitting there trying to work. I know that when I was working on the gym floor, I never had to deal with that and I didn't understand it. But now that it's a mostly work from home position, I mean, shoot, currently right now, I'm recording this at a desk. And so you get that kind of tightness in your upper back, maybe, a crunchy feeling in your shoulders. Maybe you're like, man, I didn't think I was as well endowed as I am. And it's hard to pull back into that kind of extended and upright position. And a lot of times we like to think that it's just us getting older. Really, it's just us spending longer times in positions that aren't best for our posture, but also aren't best for really anything else that we're trying to do, right? So, you guys are former athletes. You're probably high functioning executives or in charge of something at work, and your posture says a lot about how successful you are, whether you're successful or not. The way you carry yourself actually matters. You had a great position there on the basketball court or on the soccer field where you're upright, broad shoulders, hands on your hips. You are the person of power. You're an authority. And transitioning that over to the office or the boardroom, that doesn't change. And so when we're thinking about, well, how do we offset what we're doing at our desk all day? It's probably not going to be going home and getting into that same position that we were in all day, even though now you're a little bit more reclined because you're on your couch. So today I want to talk about my article from the weekend and this idea of pulling exercises and why pulling exercises are so important for how we operate. Not only is it to help get you out of pain, but it's also to help you appear with the power that you actually have, right? So the things that we need to work on are going to be the things that help us fight that gravitational pull into that cashew position and get us upright, maybe breathing a little bit better, maybe reducing some of that shoulder pain. And I want to start with a little bit of a reality check because, as I mentioned in the article, shoulder pain is fairly common, right? Somewhere between 15% and 25% of adults are walking around with shoulder pain right now. Now, think of it this way: we're athletes, our bodies carry a different history. We've got a lot more miles on those shoulders. So, if we were to peel back that onion a little bit more, it may be closer to 35 to 40% of us are walking around with some sort of shoulder pain at any given time. For my overhead athletes, my throwers, volleyball players who are spiking, even sprinters, like the amount of shoulder flexion and extension, that up and down movement while you're running up and down the track, that's still wear and tear on the shoulders. But when we were athletes, we had a very structured way of dealing with that, whether that was our coach or our strength coach. But now that we're out of that world and into the real world, some of that training and offsetting gets replaced by sitting at our desks, by our commutes in the car every day, hunched over your keyboard, trying to finish that last report before you go home for the weekend. And maybe you get a workout in from time to time. But the position that I'm referring to is this kind of forward flex where your chin would be coming down towards your chest. Your shoulders now become rounded, and your hands, instead of being palms up when your arms are straight, now you're going palms back. And that puts a lot of stress here on this shoulder where you're trying to create movement. And there's more that comes with this, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But we're trying to open up that position rather than continuing to be closed off. So maybe coming home, flipping on the Netflix isn't the best way to go about fixing the pain. I think we're going to actually have to address it. And when you do go to address the shoulder strength and the shoulder complex, push ups, bench presses, overhead presses, anything that you're moving weight away from your body, they're all great exercises. But because we're already biasing towards those positions of shoulders forward, scapula, shoulder blades pulled apart in the back, you're probably not doing enough to offset that position, and you're probably more often than not doubling down on that poor posture position. So what we want to do is balance that by making sure that we train your back. And I'm not talking about back like deadlifts back. I'm talking about upper back. Like when you walk past someone and they turn their head around and like, oh man, do you see the shoulders on that one? Do you see the lats on that one? Like you're wearing a strapless dress, or guys, you're walking down the beach. Like your back says a lot about the work that you put into your body. And so speaking from a physiological and biomechanical standpoint, creating balance between the front and the back is one way to stabilize that shoulder. And when you've got a stable shoulder, they feel better. There's less stress and strain on it, especially undue strain. And so we want to talk about getting into and out of different positions, but biasing, especially in your workouts, the exercise part of this of pulling weights towards your body or pulling dumbbells towards your body, whether that's from the front or from the overhead position. And we're going to talk about all the angles in between. So the reason I kind of called us all desk jockeys at this point is because think about the position a jockey is on the horse. They're over the saddle, chest over the reins, and they're holding on for dear life. And for some of us, that's what we're doing at our desk every day. So I want to make sure that when you do go work out, you're incorporating the right exercise that's going to offset those rounded shoulders and pull them back. They're going to take some of the tension off of the neck muscles because now you've got more of your erectors and your lats and your rhomboids pulling the shoulder blades into the position that they need to be in and restore that balance, right? And one thing that I think people miss, and I'll just touch on this briefly because I touched on it in the article, is it helps you breathe. And breathing is one of those things that you don't realize you do so much of. You're taking 20,000 breaths on average a day. Maybe a little more if you're doing a hard cardio workout, but on average, you're taking about 20,000 breaths. And so when your posture is not great and you're compressing your rib cage, you actually can't fill your lungs in the way that you should. Your lungs literally have less room to expand. So when we strengthen the upper back, we're actually strengthening some of those muscles that helps with breathing. We're able to open up that rib cage. We're able to get the diaphragm, which is the muscle that sits under the lungs, to drop, to give us even more volume to fill our lungs with. So yes, when I'm talking about some of these exercises that we're about to go through, they can actually help you breathe a little bit better. And if we can breathe better, we can relax more. We don't feel as tense. Now it's one of those things that it's a compounding effect. So when we fix this one thing, this one chink in our armor, it makes us much stronger overall. And so with that, let's talk about the shoulder, because I've mentioned it. You read a little bit about it in the article, but there's a lot going on here. It's more than just the arm bone connects to the torso. The arm bone, the humerus in this case, is actually making contact with the end of your clavicle and one of the things that sticks off your shoulder blade. And when we're talking about the shoulder blades play a huge part in stabilizing this joint. They also play a big part in giving us the mobility that we need in order to reach overhead, in order to create stability around that joint. And just on the scapula itself, there are 16 muscles that attach to it. So the shoulder blade is controlled by a lot of little muscles doing a fine dance, making sure that this shoulder doesn't dislocate, doesn't slip out of joint, and really is just maintained in a stable environment. And so to talk about those shoulder blades just a little bit more, there's 4 things that they do. And I'll touch on each of these and I won't bore you to death, but Think about it this way. These shoulder blades, these flat bones that sit on top of our rib cage, they actually don't attach to our main skeleton. They do attach to the arm, but the arm's not a part of the main skeleton. They just kind of glide, or they should glide around on the top of our rib cage. And when they glide, they need to be able to do 4 things. They need to be able to rotate. So when they rotate up and rotate down, that's what gives the arm actually room to move in this position. And so it's not just the fact that my delts are pulling my arm up into the overhead position, it's that those delts are pulling, but there's the scapula that's rotating to allow this arm to move but stay stable. They also need to tilt. So when I get up to that top position, the scapula actually pull back off the rib cage just a little bit, again, to give the head of the humerus, which is the top of the arm bone, room to move around in that shoulder. They need to slide and glide, right? So they need to upwardly rotate, downwardly rotate. They need to be able to tilt. They also need to be able to protract, just meaning roll around the sides of the rib cage, and they need to retract, meaning you need to be able to squeeze them together. So meaning, when you've probably heard this before, if you've taken any sort of exercise class, when you're talking shoulder blades down and back, that's the down or squeeze together part, and then, dropping them into your back pockets. That's cool. That's a fine cue, but it's not a catch-all. And so before I get into the different types of exercises, I want to deep dive on that cue just for a minute. So now if I were to tell you to squeeze your shoulder blades together, drop them into your back pocket, and then try to raise your arms, you're going to find, keep squeezing and holding those scapula in place, that you get a little bit of a pinch once your arm gets to about parallel with the floor. So when I get my arm about parallel to the floor, if I don't let that shoulder blade move, I'm going to start to create some irritation because I've got bone of the arm bone rubbing on bone of the shoulder blade, and that's not going to feel very comfortable. So when we move this arm, we also want our shoulder blades to move with it. Same thing, if I were to punch out in front of me, I want my scapula to roll around the front towards, not to the front because that would be weird, but towards the front of my rib cage. And then when I pull back, I want it to go back to where it started and move closer to the spine. Getting those to move in the right positions is going to help that shoulder move smoothly, but also be more stable and hurt less over time because you're not fighting your anatomy to be in the right position. This is just like this stupid Instagram trend where we're talking about women needing to turn their hands out to do a push-up. Yes and no. And I just posted about this on my Instagram, kind of deflating this whole idea. What we want to do, even for pushing and pulling, we want to get your hands into the right position relative to where they are strongest and most stable in that shoulder girdle. That's for horizontal pushes and pulls. For overhead, it's kind of fair game. So we'll talk about that. I'll probably post some more stuff on Instagram about it. But let's talk about rows first, because rows are the things, probably one of my most favorite exercises. There's a million different ways to do it. And for a lot of my former athletes, I really like the hands-free or unilateral, so single arm at a time, variations of rowing, meaning I'm pulling a weight that's far away from my body, closer to my body. And the reason I like it for athletes is that you've spent a lot of time putting stress into your shoulder joints. So guess what? From the left to the right, they're not the same. If your left arm was your dominant arm, whether you're spiking, throwing, playing tennis, any of those things where you're bringing that hand through, that's put a lot more stress on that dominant side than it did on the non-dominant side. And that's sort of a big deal because that means those bones have adapted to that stress and will give you a slightly different anatomical setup from left to right. So forget about what other people are doing. Let's focus on your left to right. Now, in general, when we're able to do more unilateral rowing, it allows you to create a little bit more thoracic rotation or upper back rotation. And that also usually plays really nicely with getting the shoulder blade to move a little bit. So when I'm first teaching a client how to row, I'm probably teaching them just protract, retract, get the weight moving. Then I'll layer on some of the rotation, because the more thoracic or upper back rotation that we can have, the less strain and stress we're going to put on the neck. So when you pair that with shoulder blades now able to move, plus less stress on the neck, that whole pain thing that we were talking about, the aches. Now granted, I'm not diagnosing anything here, so let me be very clear there. But a lot of times if I can make a client stronger, a lot of those aches and pains that they were feeling before tend to just evaporate. They go away. And right, so as you're going through the rows, this could be a dumbbell row. This could be a cable row. The key is using a load that's heavy enough to manage, that gets challenging at the end of your set, but also not keeping that shoulder blade locked down in place as you're reaching forward, right? Let it go. Let that give you an extra 2 or 3 inches of reach. And then when you pull back, squeeze and try to get a little bit more on the row, right? So getting a big squeeze on that shoulder blade at the back and almost like a stretch at the bottom. That's where you're going to see the most benefit and allow that shoulder to move like it should. Now, the thing I will mention here is that when you're doing this, let your hand rotate. So you can go palm down on the way up. You can go palm up on the way back in. That's going to play really nicely with the elbow too. So if you've had elbow issues in the past, you probably want to incorporate that arm rotation, the lower arm rotation as you go, right? So seated cable rows, single arm dumbbell rows, chest supported rows, I really like. Now, ladies, if you're doing a chest supported row, make sure to get the girls up above the end of the bench. That's going to help you not squish them and feel uncomfortable. Or you can stack some pads underneath you to give you a little bit of a deficit to work through. And then let's talk about vertical pulls. If you have the ability to get up overhead, because getting overhead can be a challenge, especially as we're getting older. I travel a fair amount for work, and every time I'm on an airplane, it amazes me at the number of folks who struggle to get even the smallest backpacker purse up into the overhead bend. They're leaned back, they've got it set on their chest, they're trying to get it up and into that bend, and they just don't have the ability to get their elbows any higher than their shoulders. Now, for women, there's some nature and nurture with that one, where going through perimenopause and menopause, sometimes we will experience what's called frozen shoulder, and we lack the ability. We have to kind of work through that. A lot of folks require physical therapy for it, but to be able to get that arm up overhead, but a lot of times is just the strength of being able to hold that arm up overhead. Now we're asking folks to put 10 to 15 pounds in that overhead bend. That can be challenging. So if we're able and we've got the mobility to get up overhead, we probably also want to pull from that overhead position. Now, this doesn't necessarily help with you getting the weight up into that overhead bend. It will indirectly, but this is going to help you with more shoulder movement and ability. So think of pull downs, or if you have the ability to do pull-ups, as the thing that's going to give you the mobility at the shoulder, and overhead presses will be the thing that gives you the stability and strength, right? So when you're doing both of those, you need both, right? So if you can't do pull-ups, because a lot of folks can't, not the biggest deal. My partner actually was able to do her first pull-up 15 years after graduating from college, and she was also a Division I athlete, right? But we were able to train that. It just took a little bit longer. So if you can't do pull-ups, that's fine. Lat pull-downs are awesome. It's the same upper body movement. There's some other mechanics that we need to account for, but in general, if you can't do pull-ups, The lat pull down is an awesome one, and you can do it from different hand positions. I really enjoy the dual cable lat pull down station. I think Life Fitness makes one of these, but it's got both cables coming down. Typically, folks just use a bar and go fixed hand position. I like putting one of the D handles on each of the pull downs because that gives me the ability to create a little bit more rotation while keeping my chest nice and tall. And because I'll count myself as an overhead athlete playing volleyball in high school all 4 years and then going on to play basketball in college, it's like, all right, this right shoulder has a lot more miles on it than the left. So I've got to make sure that I'm moving it in a way that doesn't irritate it because even as a fitness professional, I deal with some of the same things, right? So when you're going to do your workout, a couple of rules that I like to provide with my clients who are former athletes as well is just pull as much as you push. So if you're doing 3 sets of 8 on a bench press, you should also do 3 sets of 8 on some sort of row or pull down. And really, you'd probably benefit more from doing more pulling than pushing. I know a lot of strength coaches that I've talked to say that there's a 2-to-1 rule. I've heard 3-to-1. I've heard 4-to-1. But in general, the minimum should be 1-to-1. For as many reps as you do pushing, you do as many reps for your pulling exercises. So if you're doing push-ups, do rows. If you're doing overhead press, do pull downs. If you're doing dips, do high rows. So we want to do movements that are the opposite loading of the ones that you've done before. Because at the end of the day, that's going to help strengthen that upper back, hold you upright. And remember, we talked about posture, pain, and breathing. If you can make all 3 of those better, your life in and around the office, driving your kids around, dealing with that stuff, or even just going to play pickleball with your friends, your shoulders will thank you. And we'll talk about other training later, but I thought this was pretty relevant considering, it's tough to get training in, but when you do and you are able to get your training in, you want to make sure that you're getting it done well and in a way that supports your body right now. So remember, if you've spent years training for performance in your sport, your body still remembers that. It still will respond to training. It just means that right now you have to train a little bit differently because your body is different. You're not the same person you were when you were in college. Your body has changed. And now, instead of preparing for your games, you're preparing for long work days, for travel, the physical demands that come with everyday life. And if pulling exercises are one of the easiest things that we can start to incorporate, bro, your shoulders, your health, your breathing, it's all going to improve. So you don't need to train like you did when you were 22, even though I know we all still like to think that we can. Just remember, we're not as good as we once were, but we're as good once as we ever were. Probably not the best philosophy to live by. But when you train with intention, your performance will improve, just like it did when you were training for your sport. We've moved to a different stage of life, and a few well-placed exercises can help you keep showing up strong. We'll talk next week. See you then.